Before I even start, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe because this story doesn't slowly turn dark, it snaps. All right. Let me take you back. It was my mom's 85th birthday, 85 years of life, of sacrifice, of raising kids, burying loved ones, and surviving things she never talked about out loud. And that day was supposed to be about celebrating all of it. The Riverside Community Center looked like it was trying too hard to be cheerful. Pink balloons floated near the ceiling, some already losing air, sagging just a little like they were tired of pretending. Streamers were taped across beige walls that smelled faintly of old carpet cleaner and coffee that had been sitting too long. Old school big band music played from small speakers, the kind of music people associate with the good old days, even if they weren't really that good. Everyone kept smiling. That's what bothered me because everything looked perfect, too perfect, and my mom, she looked incredible. She wore a soft pink dress she'd owned for years, the one she always said she was saving for something special. Her hair was done beautifully, every silver strand in place. She stood tall, shoulders back, chin lifted, greeting guests like a queen holding court. This was a woman who had lived a full, hard life and was still sharp as a tack. She laughed loudly, corrected people when they got stories wrong. Teased the grandkids, she was present, fully there, not fragile, not confused, not fading. That's when my sister Linda stepped in close. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said warmly. Her smile was flawless, wide, polite, practiced. The kind of smile you see in family Christmas photos and church bulletins. But it didn't feel real. It felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced it in the mirror. Standing just behind her was her husband, Paul. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't laughing or chatting or holding a drink like everyone else. His eyes moved constantly, scanning the room, pausing on exits, watching who was standing near Mom and who wasn't. It didn't look like concern. It looked like calculation, and that's when my son Jason grabbed my elbow, not gently, not playfully. His grip was tight, white-knuckle tight, the kind of grip you use when you're afraid someone might slip away if you loosen it. He leaned in close, his lips barely moving, and whispered something that sent a shock straight through my spine. "Get your bag, we're leaving right now, act normal." I laughed, because denial is easier than panic. Because the alternative, that something was actually wrong, felt impossible in a room full of cake and candles. Jason had always been protective, especially since his father died 3 years earlier, sometimes too protective. So I whispered back, half annoyed, half confused, "What are you talking about?" He didn't answer. He smiled at a passing guest, nodded politely, made small talk like nothing was wrong. And then he started steering me through the crowd, one careful step at a time, like we were just heading outside for fresh air. But his eyes, I had seen that look exactly twice before. Once when he caught his father cheating. Once when doctors told us the cancer had spread. Both times my life fell apart within hours. That look wasn't teenage panic, it wasn't imagination, it was certainty. Suddenly the music felt too loud, the laughter felt forced. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls were closing in. Every smile I saw now looked fake. Every hug felt staged. The entire party felt like a performance, something carefully arranged to distract us from something happening just beneath the surface. Jason leaned closer and muttered through clenched teeth, "Not here, just walk." And in that moment, walking toward the exit with my son gripping my arm, my heart pounding for reasons I couldn't yet explain, I realized something chilling. This wasn't just a birthday party. Something was very, very wrong. The moment we got into the car, Jason slammed his door shut and immediately hit the lock button. Click, click. The sound echoed inside the car, sharp and final, like a decision that couldn't be undone. He started the engine, then pulled into the farthest corner of the parking lot, away from the lights, away from the windows, away from anyone who might recognize us. His hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not the nervous tremble of a kid in trouble, but the raw, uncontrollable shaking of someone holding in fear. "Jason," I said softly, trying to keep my voice steady. "You're scaring me." He didn't look at me at first. He just stared straight ahead through the windshield, breathing slowly, like he was trying to keep himself from exploding. Then finally he turned toward me. "Good," he said quietly. Because what I heard scared the hell out of me. He glanced back toward the building. From where we sat, the Riverside Community Center looked peaceful. Warm light spilled through the big windows. I could still see people laughing, moving around tables, taking pictures. My mother stood near the cake, smiling, alive, completely unaware that her world was about to be ripped apart. Nothing looked wrong. That's what made it worse. Jason reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen, hesitating. "Before I play this," he said, his voice tight, "you need to promise me something." My chest tightened. "What?" I asked. "No matter what you hear," he said, locking eyes with me, "we go straight to the police. No confronting them, no calling anyone, no asking for explanations." The seriousness in his voice made my stomach drop. Jason, this is your aunt, I whispered. This is family. That's exactly why we don't confront them, he snapped back. Then softer, promise me. I hesitated, and that hesitation almost cost us everything. Okay, I said finally. I promise, Jason exhaled slowly, then tapped the screen. The audio began with faint background noise, clinking glasses, muffled music, the hum of voices. I recognized the sound instantly. It was the party. Then a familiar voice came through. Linda, she signed the papers this morning, right? My heart skipped. Paul answered calmly, like they were discussing groceries. Yeah, power of attorney's officially yours now. The old bat thinks it's just Medicare paperwork. The words hit me like a punch to the chest. I felt my vision blur. Linda laughed softly. Good, once she's in the nursing home, we sell the house. Market's hot right now. We should clear at least 400 grand. $400,000. That was my mother's house. The house where we grew up. The house where my father took his last breath. The house my mother swore she would die in. Paul's voice came again, lower this time. I've already got the doctor lined up. He'll say she's showing signs of dementia. We'll make it an emergency commitment. Emergency commitment. I couldn't process it. They weren't talking about care. They weren't talking about safety. They were talking about removing her. Jason paused the recording. The silence inside the car felt suffocating. There's more, he said quietly. My throat felt tight. More, I whispered. Jason nodded. They're planning to drug her tonight. The words didn't feel real. Drug her, at her own birthday party, surrounded by friends, family, cake, and candles. Jason rubbed his hands together like he was trying to warm them. I was in the hallway earlier, he continued. I heard them whispering near the storage room. That's when I started recording. I didn't even know what I was hearing at first until it all clicked. I stared out the windshield, my mind racing. My sister, my brother-in-law, planning to steal my mother's life while pretending to celebrate it. Behind us, the party went on. Music played, people laughed, my mom smiled. And inside that car, with the recording still paused on Jason's phone, I realized something terrifying. The danger wasn't coming. It was already happening. I couldn't breathe. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the car, like someone had sealed us inside a vacuum. My chest tightened, my hands went numb, and for a terrifying moment, I honestly thought I might pass out. Drug her. Those two words echoed in my head over and over again. Not in a hospital, not for treatment, but at her own birthday party, surrounded by balloons, cake, and people who believed they were celebrating her life. Paul has something in his jacket, Jason said quietly, his voice shaking despite his effort to stay calm. I heard him say it would make her confused, disoriented, slow. They want her to seem unstable. I turned toward him slowly. My mouth felt dry. They want an incident, he continued. Something public, something dramatic enough that they can say it's an emergency. That way they can force her into a facility without questions. That's when the full truth finally hit me. This wasn't greed. This wasn't about paperwork or inheritance or impatience. This was a plan, carefully thought out, carefully timed. This was kidnapping disguised as concern. I looked back toward the community center. Through the windows, I could still see my mom. She was laughing loudly now, leaning slightly on a table as she told a story. Her eyes were sharp, her voice strong, her movement steady. She corrected someone mid-sentence and waved her fork like a judge's gavel, making everyone laugh. This was not a woman losing her mind. This was not someone who needed to be saved from herself. She was being targeted. We have to go back, I whispered, my voice breaking. We can't just sit here. Jason shook his head immediately. No, he said firmly. If we go back now, they'll know something's wrong. They'll destroy the recording. They'll deny everything. Or worse, they'll move faster. I hated that he was right. I hated that my son was thinking 10 steps ahead while I was still trying to understand how my own sister could do something like this. Right now, Jason continued, the only thing protecting Grandma is that room full of people. 50 witnesses, cameras, eyes everywhere. My phone vibrated in my hand. A text from Linda. Where did you go? Mom's asking for you. Seconds later, another message popped up. Jason, too, come back. Cake's amazing. My stomach twisted. She wasn't worried about Mom. She was worried about us. She needed us back inside, smiling, playing our roles, pretending nothing was wrong. Jason glanced at my phone and let out a slow breath. They're nervous, he said. That's good. And then we saw him. Paul stepped out of the building. He didn't walk toward his car. He didn't light a cigarette. He stood still and scanned the parking lot slowly, methodically, his eyes moving from row to row like he was searching for something specific, like he was searching for us. My heart slammed so hard I could hear it in my ears. I sank lower in my seat as Jason turned off the interior light. Paul's gaze passed over our car once, then again. Finally, he turned and went back inside. Jason exhaled. This party isn't a celebration, he whispered. It's a setup, and in that moment, sitting in the dark, listening to music drift faintly from the building where my mother laughed completely unaware of the danger circling her, a terrifying realization settled deep into my bones. If my own sister could plan something like this, if she could smile, hug our mother, and plot her removal on the same day, then I had no idea what she was capable of next. And for the first time in my life, I understood something chilling. The people who can hurt you the most are the ones who already have a seat at your table. Before we go any further, pause for just half a second. If your own sibling was secretly plotting against your parent, would you have seen it coming? Yeah, neither did I. Now listen carefully. My son Jason didn't hesitate. Not for a second, while I was still sitting there, frozen, trying to process the fact that my sister was planning to steal our mother's life right in front of us, Jason had already pulled his phone out. His fingers moved fast, purposeful. He dialed 911, and then he said words I never imagined would come out of our mouths, not in this lifetime, not about our own family. I need to report elder abuse and fraud, he said clearly. It's happening right now. Those words felt heavy in the air, like they didn't belong to us, like they belonged to someone else's nightmare. I stared through the windshield at the Riverside Community Center. Inside, my mom was still laughing. Still cutting cake, still hugging friends who thought this was just another happy birthday party. She looked peaceful, safe, loved. Outside, I was sitting in a parked car, my heart racing, realizing my sister was about to erase my mother's independence, her home, her voice, her freedom, all in one night. The dispatcher's voice came through the speaker. Calm, measured, professional, way too calm for what was happening inside my chest. Is your mother currently safe? The question hit me hard. She looks safe, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully, but they're planning to drug her tonight. There was a brief pause on the line, just a second, but it felt like forever. Then the dispatcher spoke again. Officers are on the way. Do not intervene, do not confront anyone. Easy to say when it's not your mother. Easy to say when you're not watching your parent laugh with people who have no idea they're standing inside a trap. Jason and I sat there in silence after the call ended. No music, no talking, just the low hum of the car engine and the distant sound of laughter drifting through the building walls. We watched the community center like we were spying on strangers, not our own family. That's when my phone buzzed again. Linda, where are you? Another buzz, another message, then another, each one more frantic than the last. She was panicking. Jason glanced at my phone and shook his head. They need you inside, he muttered. Makes everything look normal, makes mom relax. I swallowed hard and typed back the lie my fingers didn't want to write. Car trouble, be right back. Through the windshield, I watched Linda read the message. Her shoulders stiffened. Then she turned on her heel and walked straight toward Paul. They leaned in close, spoke quickly, urgently. No smiles now, no pretending. Then Paul turned around and headed straight for the exit, straight toward the parking lot, toward us. My heart started pounding so hard I thought he might hear it through the glass. In that moment, sitting there in the dark with my son beside me and police on the way, I understood something terrifying. The plan hadn't failed yet, it was still moving, and if we made one wrong move, we wouldn't just lose the house, we'd lose my mother. Get down, Jason whispered, not loudly, not urgently. Just enough for me to understand that this was not a suggestion. We sank lower in our seats just as Paul walked past our car. My heart was pounding so violently I was sure he could hear it. I held my breath, barely blinking, watching his shoes move slowly across the pavement through the narrow gap beneath the dashboard. He stopped right next to our car. I felt Jason tense beside me. Paul stood there for a moment, perfectly still, like a predator who knew something was nearby but couldn't quite see it yet. Then he slowly turned his head, scanning the rows of parked cars, his eyes sharp and searching. I could see his reflection faintly in our side mirror. No smile, no confusion, just irritation. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Even with the windows rolled up, we could hear his voice, low, sharp, clipped. They're not here, he said. Pause. Yeah, I checked everywhere. Another pause. Cars are still here, but they're gone. My stomach dropped. That meant he'd noticed our car, just not us. Then his tone shifted, calmer, controlled. No. We stick to the plan. Stick to the plan. Those 4 words hit me harder than anything I'd heard all night. This wasn't panic. This wasn't confusion. This was confidence. The voice of someone who knew exactly what was supposed to happen next and fully believed it still would. Paul ended the call, slipped the phone back into his pocket, and walked back toward the building like nothing had happened. Like he wasn't about to ruin someone's life. As soon as the doors closed behind him, I let out the breath I'd been holding. Jason stared straight ahead. They're still going through with it, I whispered. Yeah, he said quietly. And that means they're running out of time. Every second that party continued felt dangerous. If the guests started leaving, if the music stopped, if the lights dimmed, my mother would be alone with them. And once she was alone. By morning, she'd wake up confused, groggy, medicated, labeled unstable. A doctor's note would magically appear. Paperwork would already be signed, and just like that, her life would no longer be hers. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clasp them together in my lap. Then suddenly, red and blue lights flashed across the dashboard. Once, twice. My heart leapt into my throat. 3 police cars rolled quietly into the parking lot. No sirens, no flashing lights. Smart. They didn't want to announce themselves. They didn't want Linda and Paul to panic or destroy evidence or rush the plan forward. An officer stepped out and approached our car cautiously. "You the callers?" he asked softly. Jason nodded and rolled down the window. "Yes," he said, "I have a recording." The officer listened with one earbud in, his expression unreadable at first. He didn't interrupt, didn't react. But when Paul's voice came through the speaker, when the words about drugging my mother played, I saw the officer's jaw tighten, just slightly. Enough. He handed the phone back. "Okay," he said. "Here's what's going to happen." My chest tightened. "2 officers are going inside in plain clothes," he continued. "They'll blend in, watch, listen." He looked directly at me. "You 2 are going back inside and acting completely normal." My heart slammed against my ribs. "Back inside?" I asked. Every instinct in my body screamed run. "If they try anything," the officer said calmly, "we intervene immediately. But if you tip them off now, they disappear or they move faster." I swallowed hard and nodded. Jason squeezed the steering wheel. "We can do this," he said quietly. As I opened the car door, my legs felt weak. Because now I understood the truth. Calling the police wasn't the scariest part. The scariest part was walking back inside, smiling at the people who were planning to steal my mother's life and pretending nothing was wrong. Walking back into that building felt unreal, like stepping onto a stage where everyone else had a script, and Jason and I were the only ones who knew how the story really ended. The door swung open and the noise hit us immediately. Same music, same laughter, same clinking glasses and forced cheer. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. The big band song was still playing, upbeat and cheerful, completely wrong for what I now knew was unfolding beneath the surface. People smiled as we passed, nodding, waving, completely unaware that this birthday party had quietly turned into a crime scene. I felt like screaming. Instead, I smiled. Linda spotted us instantly. She rushed over with her arms open, relief written all over her face, just a little too exaggerated to be genuine. "There you are," she said brightly. Mom was worried sick. Her smile never slipped, but her eyes moved quickly, checking Jason's hands, my purse, our expressions, searching for cracks. "Car trouble," I said casually, forcing my voice to stay even. Jason nodded. "Handled." She stared at us for one extra second, just one, then she laughed loud and light. "Well, you missed Mom's speech." I wanted to scream that my mother shouldn't have to give speeches on the same night someone was planning to steal her freedom. Instead, I laughed too. Across the room, I saw my mom, still radiant, still sharp, still completely herself. She sat at a round table surrounded by friends, holding court like she always had. She was mid-story, waving her hands for emphasis, correcting someone's memory and making the whole table laugh. Not confused, not fragile, alive. My chest tightened. Linda leaned closer to me, lowering her voice. "Paul and I were thinking we'd drive Mom home tonight." There it was, the trap. They wanted her alone. My heart pounded, but I didn't hesitate. "That's sweet," I said gently, "but Jason and I will take her." For the first time all night, Linda's smile cracked. It was subtle, just a flicker, but I saw it. "Oh well," she stammered softly, then recovered quickly. "We actually have some paperwork to go through tonight." Paperwork, more lies, more signatures, more control. I nodded calmly. "We'll see." That's when something caught my eye. Across the room, Paul was standing near the refreshments table, speaking quietly with a tall man wearing a doctor's coat. Not a guest's jacket, not a costume, a real doctor's coat. The man leaned in close as Paul spoke, nodding occasionally, his eyes drifting again and again toward my mother, watching her, evaluating her. My blood ran cold. Linda followed my gaze and smiled proudly, like she was revealing a surprise. "Isn't it wonderful that Dr. Peterson could stop by?" she said sweetly. "He's been so worried about Mom's confusion lately." Confusion? My mother had just delivered a 10-minute speech, naming every guest, recalling decades-old stories with perfect clarity. This wasn't concern, this was preparation. That's when it finally hit me. They didn't just plan paperwork, they didn't just plan medication, they didn't just plan isolation. They planned a diagnosis, a doctor, a report, a signature. Everything they needed to erase my mother's independence, all wrapped up in a pink balloon birthday party. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Somewhere in the room, 2 plainclothes officers blended in seamlessly, pretending to be guests, watching everything unfold. Linda leaned in closer, her voice warm and fake. "Isn't it nice," she said, "when family takes care of family?" I smiled back at her, and in that moment, standing just a few feet away from my mother, I made a silent promise. No matter how this ended, they were not taking her tonight, not without a fight. "Let me ask you something real quick. Have you ever felt danger before anything actually happened? Not fear, not panic, something quieter, like your body knew the truth before your brain could explain it." Because that's exactly what I felt when my sister Linda touched my arm and said, "Carol, can I speak with you privately for a minute?" Her voice was sweet, too sweet, the kind of sweetness that doesn't come from warmth but from calculation. Every instinct in my body screamed no, but refusing would have raised questions. Refusing would have told her I was onto her. And right now, the most dangerous thing I could do was let her know I knew, so I smiled. Sure, I said lightly. She led me toward a quiet corner near the kitchen, away from the music, away from Jason, away from Mom. Each step felt heavier than the last, like I was walking into a trap I could already see closing. The moment we were out of earshot, her face changed. The warm party host's smile disappeared instantly. What replaced it wasn't anger, it was worse, cold, calculated, sharp. "We need to talk about Mom," Linda said. The words landed like a verdict. "What about her?" I asked calmly, even though my heart was pounding. She sighed dramatically, rubbing her temples like a woman burdened by responsibility. "Don't play dumb, Carol. You've noticed the changes." "What changes?" Her eyes narrowed. "She's forgetting things, leaving the stove on, getting confused." "Lie. Yesterday," Linda continued, lowering her voice, "I found her outside at 3 in the morning. In her nightgown, waiting for Dad to come home. Dad had been dead for 12 years. Either that had happened or Linda was planting evidence." "I haven't noticed any of that," I said evenly. She scoffed. "Of course you haven't. You don't see her every day like I do." That one hurt, because part of it was true. Linda had been around more lately, more visits, more phone calls, more checking in. But now I understood, those weren't visits. They were recon missions. She was studying my mother, testing boundaries, gathering material. "We need to start thinking about her safety," Linda continued, her voice thick with fake concern. "Before something terrible happens." The word terrible hung in the air. "What are you suggesting?" I asked. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice even further. "Memory care." There it was, not concern, not help, a destination. My stomach tightened. "Linda," I said slowly, "she doesn't have dementia." "Not officially," she replied smoothly. "But early intervention is key. Early intervention. That's what you call locking someone away before they can fight back." I forced my voice to stay calm. "I think we should slow down, get a second opinion." Her expression hardened immediately. "I already have the authority to make these decisions." The room seemed to tilt. "What authority?" I asked. She smiled. Not kindly, not warmly. "Power of attorney." My blood ran cold. "When did that happen?" "This morning." "This morning, at her own birthday party." "She signed voluntarily," Linda added quickly. "Dr. Peterson witnessed it." "Of course he did." I took a slow breath, grounding myself. "I want to see the documents. They're at my house." "Then let's go get them," I said. She laughed nervously, shaking her head. "Carol, don't be ridiculous." "No," I said quietly, meeting her eyes. "What's ridiculous is making life-altering decisions without transparency." For just a split second, panic flickered across her face, then it vanished. "Fine," she said sharply. "Tomorrow morning." 9 a.m. tomorrow morning would be too late. By tomorrow morning, Mom would already be gone, and Linda knew it. That's when Jason appeared at my side. "Grandma wants you to sit with her," he said casually. But his eyes told me everything. Something was coming, and whatever it was happening tonight. Linda didn't stop talking. Once she'd said the words "power of attorney," it was like a dam had broken. The mask slipped just enough for me to see how prepared she really was. "Paul and I have been researching this for months," she said smoothly, folding her arms like a professional delivering bad news. "We found a beautiful place, high-end, private rooms, excellent staff, not like those depressing nursing homes you see on TV. She smiled, as if that alone should comfort me. "Linda," I said carefully, "she doesn't have dementia." She tilted her head slightly. "Not officially," she replied, "but that's how these things start. Little moments, little lapses. Early intervention is key. Early intervention." The phrase made my skin crawl. That wasn't medical language. That was legal language, the kind used to justify decisions before someone could object. "Intervention for what?" I asked. "She's independent. She cooks. She drives." She just gave a 10-minute speech without notes. Linda exhaled sharply, annoyed now. "Carol, denial helps no one." I stared at her. "What helps no one," I said slowly, "is rushing into life-altering decisions without transparency." Her eyes hardened. "I already told you," she said, lowering her voice. "I have the authority." The words echoed in my head. "What authority?" I asked, even though I already knew. She smiled again, and this time there was nothing friendly about it. "Power of attorney," she repeated. "Medical and financial." My stomach dropped. "When?" I asked. "This morning," she said casually. "Before the party. This morning, at her own birthday celebration." "She signed voluntarily," Linda continued. "Dr. Peterson explained everything. She agreed it was for the best." Dr. Peterson, the same man I'd just seen watching my mother like a case study. I forced myself to breathe. "I want to see the documents." Linda waved a dismissive hand. "They're at my house." "Then let's go get them," I said immediately. Her laugh came out too fast, too sharp. "Carol, don't be ridiculous. We're in the middle of a party." "What's ridiculous," I replied quietly, "is making irreversible decisions without letting everyone see the paperwork." For the first time since we'd stepped away from the crowd, she hesitated, just for a second. Her jaw tightened, her eyes flicked toward the main room, toward my mother. Then she recovered. Fine, she said stiffly. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. By tomorrow morning, Mom would already be medicated. Declared confused, transported for her own safety. And Linda knew it. I could see it in the way her shoulders relaxed, like she believed she'd already won. That won't work for me, I said calmly. She frowned. Excuse me, if you're acting in Mom's best interest, I continued. There's no reason to wait. Her voice dropped, sharp now. You're being difficult. No, I said evenly. I'm being careful. Her eyes flashed with something close to anger. This is exactly why Mom needs someone stable making decisions, she snapped. You're emotional. There it was, discredit the opposition. I opened my mouth to respond when a familiar voice cut in beside me. Grandma wants you to sit with her, Jason said casually. His tone was relaxed, but his eyes, they were locked on Linda, warning, alert, ready. Linda turned, startled. Oh, Jason, she said brightly, instantly switching back to the party host voice. We're just talking about your grandmother. I figured, he said simply. I took that moment to step away. As I moved back toward my mother's table, my heart was racing, not with fear, but with clarity. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't concern gone wrong. This was a strategy, paperwork, doctor, timeline. They weren't reacting to my mother declining. They were manufacturing the decline. And the worst part, they were doing it confidently, like people who believed the system would protect them. As I sat down beside my mom, she smiled up at me. Everything okay? She asked. I squeezed her hand gently. Everything's fine, I lied, but inside I knew the truth. The trap was already set. And unless something stopped it tonight, the paperwork would be the weapon that took my mother away. We had barely settled back at Mom's table when Linda reappeared. She moved fast now, too fast for someone who was supposedly calm. In her hands was a small pastel gift bag, tissue paper fluffed just right, ribbon curled perfectly. The kind of bag designed to look thoughtful, innocent, forgettable. Mom, Linda said brightly, loud enough to draw attention. I almost forgot one last little present. My stomach dropped. Mom smiled, genuinely touched. Oh, Linda, you've already done too much. Inside the bag, I already knew, was something meant to look harmless. Linda reached in and pulled it out like a magician revealing the final trick. Herbal tea, chamomile. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it physically hurt. Chamomile, Linda said warmly. You mentioned you've been having trouble sleeping. Of course she did. Tea was perfect, natural, gentle, something no one would question, something that could be altered without anyone noticing. My mind raced. I reached for the bag before Mom could. Mind if I take a look? I asked lightly. Linda's hand shot out instantly and grabbed my wrist. Her nails dug in just enough to hurt. They're specially wrapped, she said quickly, smiling too wide. That told me everything. I forced my smile to grow even wider. Oh, I'm just curious, I said sweetly. I've been having trouble sleeping too. For half a second we stood there, smiling at each other, pretending nothing was wrong, while silently fighting over what might have been poison. Guests nearby laughed. Someone clinked a glass. Music played on. No one noticed. Finally, Linda let go. I looked inside the bag. 3 boxes, factory sealed, nothing obvious, but Linda's hands were shaking. These look great, I said calmly, turning to Jason. Why don't you put them in the car so Grandma doesn't forget them? Jason didn't hesitate. Good idea, he said, already taking the bag. Linda's smile cracked just a little. That's not necessary, she said too quickly. Too late. Jason was already walking away. That's when a new presence slid into the moment. Mrs. Wilson, a man said warmly, Dr. Peterson. He stepped closer to my mother, posture confident, voice practiced, the tone of someone used to authority being unquestioned. I was hoping to ask you a few questions. Mom looked up, curious. What kind of questions? Just a quick cognitive check-in, he said gently. Nothing serious. At her birthday party, in front of friends, in front of witnesses, something inside me snapped. No, I said firmly, stepping forward. The doctor blinked, clearly not used to being challenged. Excuse me, this isn't the time or place for medical evaluations, I said, especially without consent. Linda jumped in immediately. Carol, he's just being thorough, she said with forced laughter. We're only trying to help Mom. I ignored her and looked straight at the doctor. Are you documenting this? I asked. Silence. Is this part of her official medical record? I pressed. More silence. His eyes flicked around the room, to the guests, to the tables, to the officers quietly watching from across the room. Finally, he cleared his throat. Perhaps another time, he said, and he walked away. Mom turned to me slowly. Her eyes were sharp, focused, not confused at all. Carol, she said quietly. What's really going on? I opened my mouth. I was going to tell her everything, and that's when the lights went out. The music cut off mid-note. The room plunged into darkness, gasps, shouts, confusion. Emergency lights kicked on red, harsh, bathing the room in an eerie glow. People panicked, chairs scraped, someone yelled for the staff, and in that chaos I saw Paul. He was already moving, already reaching. His hand clamped around my mother's arm. Come on, he said sharply. We're going outside. My blood turned to ice. This was it, the moment, the distraction they'd been waiting for. I lunged forward and screamed her name, and the room erupted into chaos as the truth finally broke through the darkness. The moment the lights died, the room didn't erupt into chaos. Not right away. Instead, it filled with that low, uneasy murmur people make when something feels wrong, but they haven't decided to panic yet. Chairs scraped softly. Voices dropped. Someone laughed nervously, too loudly, trying to fill the silence. Red emergency lights flickered on, bathing the entire room in an eerie glow that felt more like a horror movie than a birthday party. The pink balloons now looked dark, the streamers looked twisted, even the cake looked wrong. Someone near the buffet chuckled and said, "Power outage happens all the time around here." Yeah, except this didn't feel random, this felt timed. And that's when I saw it. Paul's hand was locked around my mother's arm, not gently, not supportively. His fingers were tight, urgent, possessive, the kind of grip you use when you're afraid someone might get away. "Come on, Mrs. Wilson," he said quickly, already pulling her toward the exit. "Let's get you somewhere safer." Something inside me snapped. "Stop," I said, stepping directly in front of him. The word came out sharper than I expected. Louder, it cut through the low hum of confusion around us. Paul froze for half a second, then forced a smile. "Carol," he said calmly, "she needs fresh air. Too many people in here." His grip tightened. I saw it clearly now. This wasn't concern, this was control. "Then open a window," I shot back. "You're hurting her." My mother looked down at his hand on her arm, then she looked up at his face. Her eyes were clear, focused, furious. "Let go of me," she said. Her voice wasn't shaky, it wasn't confused. It was calm, sharp, unmistakably aware. Paul didn't let go. That's when Jason stepped in beside me, close enough that Paul couldn't ignore him. "Hands off my grandma," 3 short sentences. Each one a warning. Paul hesitated, just long enough. I grabbed my mother's arm and pulled her toward me. This time, Paul didn't resist, not because he suddenly agreed, but because eyes were starting to turn toward us. Around the room, staff members with flashlights were calmly guiding guests toward the exits. Orderly, controlled, too controlled. This wasn't a panicked evacuation. This was containment. I scanned the room. "Where's Linda?" I demanded. Paul's eyes darted. "She went to check the generator," he said quickly. My blood ran cold. Who knows where a building's generator is unless they plan to shut it down? The realization settled in my stomach like a stone. This outage wasn't an accident, it was the distraction. The moment they'd been waiting for. My mother gripped my hand tightly. "Carol," she said quietly, "why is he trying to take me outside?" I opened my mouth to answer, but before I could, Paul stepped forward again, forcing a laugh. "Everyone's overreacting," he said. "Let's just get her home." "No," I said firmly. The word echoed louder than I expected in the dim room. Jason tightened his stance beside us. "Jason," I said quietly, without taking my eyes off Paul, "we're leaving now together." Paul moved to block us. "The parking lot's chaotic," he said. "It's safer to wait." "No," I repeated, because now I understood the truth. If we went outside with him, there wouldn't be witnesses, and whatever happened next would be called an incident. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The red lights pulsed around us. Somewhere in the crowd, someone called my mother's name. Paul took one more step toward us, and that was the moment I knew the party was over. The masks were slipping, and whatever happened next would decide whether my mother walked out of that building free or not at all. "Jason," I said quietly, my voice steady even though my heart was racing, "we're leaving now together." I tightened my grip on my mother's hand. Paul stepped in front of us again, his body angled just enough to block the path without making it obvious. "The parking lot's chaotic," he said smoothly. "It's safer to wait until things calm down." "No," I said, just one word, but this time there was no politeness left in it. The red emergency lights flickered again, casting long shadows across Paul's face. Sweat dotted his forehead now. His eyes kept shifting, not toward my mother, not toward me, but toward the exits. Like he was running out of options. That's when a calm voice came from behind us. "I think that's an excellent idea." I turned. Out of the shadows stepped a man I'd seen earlier laughing near the snack table, holding a paper plate like any other guest. Except now he wasn't smiling. Officer Martinez. His jacket was open, his badge fully visible, catching the red light with every step. The casual posture was gone. What replaced it was authority, solid, unmovable. Paul froze. "Officer," Paul said carefully, forcing a smile that didn't quite work anymore. "Is there a problem?" "Oh yeah," Officer Martinez replied calmly. "Several." 2 more officers stepped out behind him, equally composed, equally unmistakable. The room grew quiet, not confused quiet, alert quiet. One of the officers held up a small, clear evidence bag. Inside it were several pills, unmarked, loose, prescription grade. "Mr. Barrett," Officer Martinez continued, "care to explain why you're carrying prescription sedatives that aren't prescribed to you?" Paul's face drained of color so fast it was almost shocking. "I don't know how those got there," he stammered. "That's ridiculous." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Let me get this straight," he said evenly. Someone planted unmarked sedatives in your jacket at your mother-in-law's 85th birthday party? A ripple of murmurs spread through the nearby guests. Phones slowly lifted. Whispers began. Paul swallowed hard. "This is a misunderstanding," he said quickly. "My wife and I were just trying to keep her safe." Mom stepped forward. "What pills?" she asked sharply. Officer Martinez immediately turned to her, his tone softening. "Ma'am," he said gently, "we believe your daughter and son-in-law were planning to drug you." The room went completely silent. No murmurs, no nervous laughter. A collective gasp rippled outward like a shockwave. My mother didn't gasp, she didn't scream. She just stood there, very still, absorbing the words. Then she asked, calmly and clearly, "Where is my daughter?" Officer Martinez hesitated just a fraction of a second. "With another officer," he said. "And Dr. Peterson." Dr. Peterson, the name hit like a punch. The room seemed to tilt slightly, like the floor had shifted beneath us. Paul's mouth opened, then closed. He looked smaller now, cornered. The officers stepped closer. "Mr. Barrett," one of them said, "please put your hands where we can see them." Around us, guests backed away, forming a loose circle. This wasn't a party anymore. This was a reckoning. Paul glanced once more at my mother. For the first time all night, there was no confidence left in his eyes, only fear. "Linda didn't mean for this too," he started. "Save it," Officer Martinez said calmly. "You can explain everything downtown." They guided Paul away as murmurs erupted behind us. Someone whispered, "I knew something felt off." Someone else said, "That poor woman." My mother stood tall. Unshaking, as Paul disappeared down the hallway, she turned to me and Jason. "They were going to drug me," she said slowly. "Yes," I replied, "they were." She closed her eyes for a brief moment, then opened them again, stronger. "Then let's finish this," she said. And in that moment, watching my 85-year-old mother stand her ground under flickering red lights, I understood something powerful. The masks were off. The truth was out, and there was no going back now. They escorted us down a narrow hallway behind the main hall, a place most guests never knew existed. The noise of the party faded behind us, replaced by the dull hum of fluorescent lights and the distant echo of raised voices. The birthday decorations ended abruptly at the doorway, as if someone had sliced the night cleanly in half. Celebration on one side, truth on the other. Inside a small security office, Linda sat slumped in a plastic chair. Her perfect makeup was smeared now, mascara streaked beneath her eyes, lipstick faded unevenly. The elegant dress she'd chosen so carefully was wrinkled, one strap slipping off her shoulder. She didn't look powerful anymore. She didn't look in control, she looked caught. The second my mother walked into the room, Linda's composure shattered. "Mom," she sobbed, standing halfway before collapsing back into the chair. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for it to go this far." Her voice cracked, desperation pouring out of her. For a moment, the room held its breath. My mother didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She didn't rush forward. She simply stood there, 85 years old, back straight, eyes steady, and asked one question. "How far did you mean for it to go?" Silence. Not even Linda could fill it. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. Paul wasn't there anymore. Neither was Dr. Peterson. Officer Martinez stepped forward gently, breaking the quiet. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, "we need to be transparent with you." He placed a folder on the small metal desk and opened it. Inside were documents, lots of them. "We found forged medical records," he continued, "pre-signed nursing home applications, emergency commitment papers filed last week, before today, before the party. Before my mother had supposedly signed anything. This wasn't panic. This wasn't a rushed decision. This was premeditated." My mother closed her eyes for a long moment. When she opened them again, something in her had changed, not broken. "Hardened, you were going to steal my house," she said quietly, looking directly at Linda. "Drug me, and lock me away so I couldn't stop you." Linda collapsed forward, sobbing uncontrollably. "We needed the money," she cried. "Paul lost his job, we were drowning, I didn't know what else to do." That was it. That was her excuse. My mother took a step closer. Her voice didn't rise, it didn't shake. "You don't get to call me Mom anymore." The words landed heavier than any scream could have. Linda broke completely. Officer Martinez cleared his throat softly. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, "we'll need you to make a formal statement. Given what we've uncovered, there are multiple charges." My mother nodded once. "I want to press every charge," she said firmly. "Every single one." There was no hesitation, no doubt. As we walked back outside, flashing red and blue lights filled the parking lot, reflecting off car windows and wide, shocked eyes. Guests whispered openly now. Phones were out, videos were being recorded. The party was officially over. Cake half cut, balloons sagging, music dead. Jason let out a long breath like he'd been holding it for hours. Officer Martinez approached him. "That recording you made," he said quietly. "It saved her life." Jason swallowed hard. My mother turned to him, placed both hands on his face, and looked at him with fierce pride. "Thank you," she said simply. Then she turned to me. 85 years old," she said softly. "And my own daughter thought I was disposable." She straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. But she was wrong. and standing there in the cold night air, surrounded by flashing lights and broken lies, I realized something I will never forget. Evil doesn't always come screaming. Sometimes it comes smiling, holding cake, carrying gifts, and calling itself family. 3 days later, not at home, not resting, not healing, I was sitting in a police station conference room that smelled like burnt coffee, stale air, and bad decisions that never really go away. The kind of room where hope comes to wait and sometimes doesn't leave. The walls were a dull gray, scratched in places where chairs had hit them over the years. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed softly overhead, like it was just as tired as the people who sat beneath it. Across from me sat Detective Sarah Rodriguez, mid-40s, calm posture, sharp eyes, the kind of woman who had seen enough human garbage to recognize it instantly and still showed up to work every day anyway. She didn't waste time, she slid a thick stack of photos across the cold metal table. "Mrs. Miller," she said evenly, "I need you to tell me if you recognize anyone here." My stomach tightened as I picked up the first photo. Linda and Paul sitting in a restaurant booth, leaning in close, heads tilted together like conspirators instead of spouses out for dinner. But it wasn't them that made my chest tighten. It was the man sitting across from them, mid-40s. Clean-cut, expensive suit, relaxed posture, the kind of guy who looked trustworthy on purpose, someone you'd let into your house without thinking twice. "I don't know him," I said quietly. Detective Rodriguez nodded. She slid the next photo forward. That same man, smiling, shaking hands with Dr. Peterson outside a medical office building. The handshake looked friendly, professional, normal, except nothing about it was. My hands started to shake. Then she placed the third photo on top. I stopped breathing. It was my mother, captured from far away, slightly grainy, taken from across the street. She was walking to her mailbox, wearing slippers, a cardigan too thin for the weather, alone. Unaware, unprotected, my throat closed. "When was this taken?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. Detective Rodriguez didn't flinch. 2 months ago, 2 months. That meant they hadn't just planned this. They'd studied her. Watched her routine, learned her habits, cataloged her life like prey, my hands clenched into fists. "They were watching her," I whispered. "Yes," the detective said gently. "They were." She leaned forward slightly. "This wasn't a last-minute decision. Your sister and her husband didn't suddenly panic and make bad choices." She tapped the photos. "This was coordinated." I felt sick. All those times Linda had stopped by just to check in. All those casual questions about Mom's schedule. All those smiles. It wasn't concern, it was reconnaissance. "Who is he?" I asked, pointing at the man in the suit. Detective Rodriguez held my gaze for a moment. "That's what we're getting to," she said. She gathered the photos back into a neat stack. "And that," she added quietly, "is where this stops being a family betrayal and starts becoming something much bigger." I leaned back in the chair, suddenly exhausted. Because in that moment, I understood something terrifying. Linda didn't come up with this plan on her own. She'd been guided. And whoever that man was, he wasn't experimenting. He was experienced. The man in the photos had a name. Detective Rodriguez didn't rush it. She waited until I was looking at her again, until she was sure I understood that whatever came next was bigger than my family. "Marcus Webb," she said. The name didn't ring a bell. That alone should have been a relief, but it wasn't, because men like Marcus Webb don't want to be known. They don't want reputations. They want invisibility. Detective Rodriguez leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. "He's a private investigator," she said, "but not the cheating spouse kind." I frowned. "Then what kind?" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He specializes in something he calls family asset protection." The phrase hit me wrong immediately. It sounded clean, professional, helpful. It made my skin crawl. She explained it slowly, methodically, the way you do when you've had to explain the same nightmare more than once. "Webb targets adult children with aging parents," she said. "Especially parents with valuable homes, savings, pensions, or investment accounts." "My mother. He approaches them quietly," Rodriguez continued, "usually through referrals. Sometimes through ads disguised as eldercare consulting." I swallowed. "What does he promise them?" I asked. "A solution," she said, "a legal one, a clean one." She let those words hang in the air. "He convinces them that their parent is already declining, even if they aren't. Then he helps them prove it." I stared at her. "You mean," I said slowly, "he helps them steal?" She didn't correct me. "At least 12 families in the last 2 years," Rodriguez continued. "Possibly more. Your mother would have been number 13. Lucky 13, or unlucky, depending on how you looked at it." Images flooded my mind. The doctor. The staged concern, the paperwork waiting in the shadows. This wasn't desperation. This was a system, a package, I whispered. Rodriguez nodded. "Exactly. Surveillance, medical cooperation, legal groundwork, all prearranged." I felt sick. "What about the doctor?" I asked. "Peterson. He wasn't Webb's only one," she said, "but he was one of the most cooperative." I clenched my jaw. "So they faked dementia, push medication." Create incidents, and once the parent is committed, Rodriguez added, control shifts, financial access follows, property gets sold, accounts get redirected. Legally, on paper, I stared down at the table. What about the other families? I asked quietly. The ones where it worked, Rodriguez exhaled slowly, like this was the part she hated most. We're reopening those cases, she said. Some of the elderly victims are still alive, still alive. That phrase hit harder than I expected. Alive but erased, locked away in facilities they never chose, labeled confused, wondering why their children stopped visiting. Some of them tried to fight it, Rodriguez continued. But once the system labels you incompetent, it's almost impossible to get your voice back. I thought of my mother standing under red emergency lights, refusing to be moved. If we hadn't acted that night, she wouldn't be sitting at home right now. She'd be somewhere else. Quiet, sedated, forgotten. Linda tried to make a deal, Rodriguez said suddenly. I looked up sharply. A deal she offered to cooperate fully, Rodriguez explained, in exchange for leniency. My stomach twisted, and, I asked, and Webb doesn't protect his clients, she said flatly. He disappears. Leaves them holding the bag. Of course he did. Men like Marcus Webb don't go down with ships. They light the fuse and walk away. We're building a case, Rodriguez said, but these networks survive because families stay silent. Because no one wants to admit their own child did this to them. I nodded slowly. Shame is the best accomplice. Your recording broke the pattern, she added. It forced this into the open. I leaned back, exhausted. This wasn't just about Linda anymore. This wasn't even about my family. This was an industry, one that fed on guilt, on trust, on aging parents who didn't know they were being hunted. And the worst part, it wore the face of concern. When I finally got home, the house was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. It felt heavy, like the walls themselves were replaying everything that had happened, the voices, the lies, the almosts. My mother was already there. Sitting in my living room like she owned the place. Calm, composed, stronger than I felt. She sat upright on the couch, hands folded neatly in her lap, watching the evening news like none of it had shaken her, like she hadn't almost lost her freedom 3 days earlier. I realized then how backwards everything felt. She was the one who should have been fragile. Instead, it was me. I sat beside her and laid the photos out on the coffee table, one by one. She leaned forward slightly, adjusting her glasses. Didn't gasp, didn't flinch, just studied them. Linda and Paul in the restaurant booth. Marcus Webb smiling like a man who never worried about consequences. The photo of herself walking to her mailbox in slippers, alone. Her fingers paused on that one. I knew someone was watching me, she said quietly. I thought I was getting paranoid. The word paranoid landed hard. Turns out she hadn't been paranoid enough. I told her everything. About Marcus Webb, about the other families, about the reopened cases, about Linda trying to make a deal to save herself. She listened without interrupting. No tears, no outrage, just silence. The kind that means someone is thinking very carefully. Finally, she spoke. What about the others? She asked. The others, I repeated. The elderly people this worked on, she clarified. The ones who didn't have a Jason recording things. I hesitated. The police are investigating, I said gently. They're reopening cases. She shook her head slowly. Police investigate crimes, she said. They don't sit with people who feel abandoned. That sentence hit me harder than anything Detective Rodriguez had said, because she was right. Investigations don't fix loneliness. Arrests don't repair trust. Court cases don't explain to an old woman why her own children stopped calling. I realized then how close we'd come, how easily my mother could have become one of those names in a file, alive but erased. That's when something terrifying settled into place. Linda hadn't invented this idea. She'd bought it, like a service, like a product, from someone who sold elder abuse in clean language and legal paperwork. And the most disturbing part, he'd sold it successfully. I looked at my mother, 85 years old, nearly stripped of everything, and realized she wasn't thinking about herself at all. She was thinking about strangers. I don't want this to end with just my story, she said softly. If this happened to me, it's happening to others. The room felt suddenly bigger, heavier. She turned to me. You have a voice, she said. Use it. That night I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The party, the smiles, the tea, the darkness. I thought about Linda not just as my sister, but as someone who'd crossed a line she could never uncross. She hadn't just betrayed our family. She'd exposed something rotten hiding in plain sight, a hidden industry, one that feeds on silence, on guilt, on aging parents who still trust their children. And I knew deep down that this wasn't over. Not for us, not for the families still living with unanswered questions, not for the elderly people sitting in quiet rooms wondering what they'd done wrong. This wasn't just a story anymore. It was a warning, and whether I was ready or not, we were going to finish it. Let me ask you something. Have you ever walked into a place that looked expensive but felt wrong the second you stepped inside? Not dirty, not broken, just wrong, like the walls were smiling too hard. Because that's exactly how it felt when we pulled up to the first nursing home on our list. The name alone sounded comforting. Sunset Manor, premium memory care, manicured lawns trimmed so perfectly they didn't look real. A stone fountain bubbling gently in the center courtyard, water sparkling in the sunlight, flower beds arranged with designer precision. Everything about the building screamed safe, upscale, trust us. It looked less like a care facility and more like a boutique hotel where rich people retired to play bridge, but my stomach tightened before I even opened the car door. Mom sat beside me, silent, studying the building through the windshield. "This place looks expensive," I said, trying to sound casual. "That's not the same thing as good," she replied. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh. And that's when the smell hit us. Industrial disinfectant, sharp, overpowering, heavy, the kind of smell that tries too hard to convince you nothing unpleasant ever happens here. It burned the back of my throat. Mom leaned closer and whispered under her breath, "Places like this always smell like fear pretending to be cleanliness." The lobby was spotless, polished floors, neutral art, soft instrumental music playing quietly through hidden speakers. A few residents sat in wheelchairs near a large television, staring blankly at a daytime talk show no one seemed to be watching. The receptionist smiled brightly without looking up. "Can I help you?" she asked, fingers still moving across the keyboard. Mom didn't hesitate. "We're here to see Margaret Foster." The woman's fingers paused for half a second, then resumed. Keyboard clicks echoed softly. "Room 247, she said. "Second floor, end of the hall." That was it. No questions, no verification, no asking who we were, nothing. She didn't ask if we were family, didn't ask for ID, didn't ask for permission. Just handed us directions. That alone sent a chill straight through me. As we walked toward the elevator, I glanced back at the receptionist. She was already answering the phone, her smile perfectly reset. "Does that bother you?" I asked quietly as the elevator doors closed. "Yes," Mom said, "very much." The elevator ride felt longer than it should have. A soft chime announced each floor, the doors opening briefly to reveal more hallways that all looked exactly the same: beige walls, identical doors, identical carpet. No personality, no warmth, just containment. When we stepped off on the second floor, the atmosphere shifted. The hallway stretched long and narrow, lit by harsh fluorescent lights. Wheelchairs lined the walls like parked cars, some empty. Some occupied, televisions mounted high near the ceiling played daytime programs, game shows, court TV, news, but no one was really watching. A woman muttered to herself as we passed. A man stared straight ahead, eyes glassy. I slowed my pace. Mom reached out and touched my arm gently. "These people aren't confused," she whispered. "They're bored and lonely and controlled." Room 247 was at the very end of the hall, the last door. The furthest place from the nurse's station. Of course it was. I stood there for a moment with my hand hovering over the door handle. My heart was pounding, not from fear of what we'd find, but from fear that we already knew. Because this place didn't feel like care, it felt like storage. And as I finally knocked on the door, one thought echoed loudly in my head. If this is what premium looks like, what happens to the people who can't afford it? Room 247 sat at the very end of the hallway, the last door, the kind of placement that makes people disappear quietly. As we walked toward it, the sounds around us faded into a dull background hum, the television noise, the shuffling of feet, the occasional cough. Wheelchairs lined the walls like forgotten furniture. Some were empty, some weren't. A woman muttered to herself as we passed. A man stared at a wall so intently it was like he was afraid to look away. No one spoke to us, no one stopped us. That might have been the worst part. Mom slowed her pace. "This is where they put people they don't expect anyone to visit," she whispered. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Room 247's door was slightly open. I knocked anyway, no answer. I pushed it gently and stepped inside. The room was small, too small. A single bed pushed against the wall, a narrow dresser with no personal photos, no decorations, no plants. Nothing that said a human life lives here. By the window sat Margaret Foster. She was tiny, frail-looking in a way that didn't come from age alone, but from being shrunk by the world. She wore a hospital gown, not pajamas, not real clothes, and thick socks that didn't quite fit her feet. She was staring out the window at the parking lot, not daydreaming, waiting. As if she expected someone to arrive any moment, even though they never did. Mom approached slowly, carefully, like she didn't want to startle her. "Mrs. Foster," she said gently, "my name is Dorothy." "This is my daughter, Carol." Margaret turned her head slowly. Her eyes were clear, not foggy, not confused, just deeply, painfully lonely. Are you here to see me?" she asked. That question shattered something inside my chest. "Yes," Mom said immediately, her voice soft but certain. "We wanted to check on you." Margaret's lower lip trembled. "No one visits anymore," she whispered. According to the police file, her son lived 12 minutes away. I pulled a chair closer and sat down. How are they treating you here? Mom asked. Margaret hesitated. Her eyes flicked to the door, then she leaned forward, lowering her voice. I'm not supposed to be here. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? I asked quietly. She clasped her hands together, fingers shaking. I signed some papers for my son, she said. He told me they were insurance forms. Same words, same setup. Then men showed up, she continued, and said I had to come here for my own safety. I felt cold all over. What papers? Mom asked. Margaret swallowed. Power of attorney, of course. Mom nodded slowly, like she already knew. What happened to your house? She asked. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Sold, she whispered. They said I needed the money for care. Her hands twisted together helplessly, but I never see the bills. I don't even have my checkbook. She looked at us with a desperation that cut straight through me. I'm not allowed to leave my floor without permission, she said. They say I forget things. She let out a shaky breath. But I remember everything. She looked directly at my mother. Do you think I could leave? That single question nearly broke me. Not when, not how, if Mom didn't hesitate. Yes, she said firmly. I do. Margaret burst into tears. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet sobbing like someone who had been holding everything in for far too long. Mom reached out and held her hand. You're not alone anymore, she said. We see you. For the first time since we walked in, Margaret smiled. And in that smile, I saw the truth. There was nothing wrong with her mind. The only thing wrong with Margaret Foster was that she trusted her son. We stayed with Margaret for over an hour. No clipboard, no checklist, no assessment, just people talking. She told us about her life the way people do when they're finally sure someone is listening, not rushing, not interrupting, not waiting for the important part. She talked about teaching third grade for almost 30 years. About how she used to bring extra pencils to school because there was always at least one kid who forgot theirs. About learning to dance with her husband in their kitchen, stepping on each other's feet and laughing until their sides hurt. She talked about her garden, her roses, her tomatoes. Her voice was steady. Her stories followed a clear timeline. She remembered names, dates, jokes. She was sharp, funny, fully present. The only thing wrong with Margaret Foster was that she trusted her son. At some point, a nurse passed by and glanced into the room. She paused, surprised, like she hadn't expected to see visitors. Then she smiled politely and kept walking. No one checked in, no one asked questions. Margaret noticed. They don't usually like me having company, she said quietly. Mom squeezed her hand. You're allowed visitors. Margaret nodded, but there was doubt in her eyes, the kind that grows when permission has been taken away too many times. When we finally stood to leave, Margaret's fingers tightened around Mom's hand. Will you come back? She asked softly. It wasn't desperation in her voice. It was hope, cautious, fragile, almost afraid to exist. Mom didn't hesitate. I promise, she said, and I don't make promises lightly. Margaret smiled again, and this time it stayed with us all the way to the door. As we walked down the hallway, the TV still blared, the wheelchairs still lined the walls, and the fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead. But everything looked different now, because now I knew what those hallways were full of, not confused people, forgotten ones. We stepped outside into the fresh air, and it hit me like a wave. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. Birds chirped, cars passed, life moved on, too easily. We got into the car and just sat there for a long time. Neither of us spoke. Finally, I broke the silence. How many more? I asked quietly. Mom stared straight ahead, hands folded in her lap. Too many, she said. I thought about Linda, how she'd tried to erase Mom for money, but Margaret and James Chen and Alina Patterson. And the other names Detective Rodriguez had mentioned. They hadn't been almost erased. They already were, their lives boxed up into rooms with no photos, their independence signed away with paperwork they didn't understand. Their voices dismissed as confusion. That's when Mom spoke again, softer this time, but stronger than before. We can't stop now, I turned to her. Mom, if we walk away, she continued, we become part of the silence that lets this happen. She looked at me then. Not as a victim, not as someone who needed protecting, but as a woman who had nearly lost everything and refused to let that be the end of the story. This isn't about revenge, she said. And it's not about family drama. She paused. This is about rescue. The words settled between us, heavy and undeniable, about standing between predators and people who never thought they'd need protection from their own children. About saying no where everyone else had looked away. As we drove off, Sunset Manor disappeared in the rearview mirror, pristine, quiet, and hiding far more than it showed. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. Linda hadn't just tried to make Mom disappear. She had accidentally woken something up, something stubborn, something loud, something that wasn't willing to look away anymore. And this time, we weren't stopping. The second nursing home didn't bother pretending to be luxury. No fountains, no stone statues, no soft music meant to make you forget where you were, just beige walls, buzzing fluorescent lights, and that same smell, disinfectant mixed with resignation. It hit us the moment we stepped inside. Not sharp like Sunset Manor, not overwhelming, just constant, like it had been soaked into the walls over decades. The sign outside read, Sunshine Manor, nothing about it felt sunny. The lobby was smaller, older, the furniture didn't match. The chairs were vinyl, cracked in places. A TV mounted in the corner played a morning news show no one was watching. A few residents sat slumped in wheelchairs, staring ahead, eyes unfocused, not confused, just checked out. This place didn't hide what it was. It didn't pretend to be comforting. It just existed. Mom stood beside me, scanning the room slowly. At least this one isn't lying about what it is, she murmured. That somehow made it worse. We approached the front desk. The woman behind it looked tired, not bored, not annoyed. Just worn down, we're here to see James Chen, Mom said calmly. The woman didn't look surprised. She didn't ask who we were, didn't ask for ID, didn't ask for permission. She just nodded and pointed down a hallway. Day room. And on the left, like people questioning placements wasn't new. Like visitors showing up unannounced didn't raise alarms anymore. As we walked down the hall, the lights buzzed overhead, flickering just slightly. The floor was scuffed linoleum. Doors lined both sides, each with a small nameplate. Some doors were open, some weren't. From one room, I heard someone coughing, deep, wet, relentless. From another, a television blared a game show laugh track that felt cruel in this place. Mom slowed her pace. They don't even try to make this feel temporary, she whispered. The day room was a large open space with folding tables and mismatched chairs. A few residents sat scattered around, some watching TV, some staring at nothing, some asleep in their chairs. And then I saw him. James Chen sat alone at a table near the window, not slumped, not wandering, not staring into space. He was working on a crossword puzzle, neatly dressed, wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose, hair combed carefully. His posture was straight, focused, fully present, not confused, not lost. Mom noticed him at the same time I did. That's him, she said softly. She approached slowly, respectfully, like she was entering someone else's space, not assuming anything. Mr. Chen, she asked, my name is Dorothy Wilson. James looked up. His eyes were sharp, assessing, curious, not the eyes of someone who didn't understand where he was. Are you from the state? He asked immediately. Another inspection? There was no fear in his voice, just irritation. No, Mom said gently, just someone checking in. He studied us for a long moment, long enough that I wondered if he'd tell us to leave. Then he said flatly, I shouldn't be here. No tears, no confusion, no rambling explanation, just anger, controlled, intelligent, contained, the kind of anger that doesn't burn out, it waits. I felt my stomach tighten. Mom pulled out a chair and sat down across from him without asking, like equals. Why do you say that? She asked. James slid the crossword puzzle toward her slightly. Friday edition, he said. New York Times, Mom glanced down, nearly finished. Only the most difficult clues left, the kind that stump even experienced solvers. I've completed it every day for 30 years, he added. Mom looked up at him. And you're here because, she asked. He let out a short, humorless laugh. My daughter decided I was inconvenient. The word hung heavy in the air. Inconvenient, not unsafe, not incapable, just inconvenient. As I sat there watching this brilliant, angry man trapped in a place that didn't even pretend to care who he was, one thought became impossible to ignore. This wasn't about confusion. This was about control, and this place. It wasn't a home, it was a holding cell. James didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. There was a quiet authority in the way he spoke, the kind that comes from a lifetime of being listened to. The kind that doesn't beg for attention because it expects it. He tapped the crossword puzzle lightly with his pen. Friday edition, New York Times, he repeated. I've completed it every day for 30 years. Mom glanced down again. The grid was nearly full. Only the most punishing clues remained, the ones designed to separate casual solvers from experts. She slid it back toward him. What was your profession? She asked. James didn't hesitate. Professor of mathematics, he said. 42 years at the university. Published 63 peer-reviewed papers. There was no bragging in his tone, just fact. I felt something twist in my stomach. And your daughter decided you were incompetent? I asked carefully. James laughed, but there was no humor in it. My house is worth more than her patience, he said flatly. There it was, different execution, same motive. She said I was forgetting things, he continued, that I left the stove on, that I'd missed appointments. He looked directly at my mother. I did none of those things, Mom nodded slowly. They always use the same script, she said. James leaned back in his chair. They don't need to prove incompetence, he said. They just need to introduce doubt. He gestured around the room. Once doubt exists, no one questions the outcome. I swallowed. How long have you been here? I asked. 8 months, he replied without hesitation. 8 months. 8 months of being parked in a place that treated his mind like a liability. Does your daughter visit? Mom asked. Once a month, James said, always with paperwork. What kind of paperwork? I asked. Financial transfers, authorizations, trust adjustments. He smiled thinly. I refuse. At least James still had his mind. But that didn't mean he had freedom. Legally, he said calmly, I'm trapped. The word landed hard. Guardianship, Mom said. James nodded. The cleanest prison there is. He explained it without bitterness, just clarity. His daughter had petitioned the court using a private evaluation, a doctor he'd never met in person, a report filled with vague language, possible decline, risk factors, best interest. The judge had signed it. No hearing. No independent assessment, no chance for rebuttal, and once guardianship is granted, James continued, your rights evaporate. He ticked them off with his fingers. No control over finances, no control over residence, no ability to terminate representation. He looked around the room. You can be fully aware and completely powerless. Mom sat very still. I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Margaret had been confused and heartbroken. James was furious and brilliant, two different personalities, same cage. As we stood to leave, James gathered his crossword and looked up at Mom. You're lucky, he said quietly. Why? She asked. You have a family member who noticed, he replied. Most people don't. That sentence stayed with me as we walked back down the hallway, because it wasn't just an observation. It was a warning, and as the doors of Sunshine Manor closed behind us, I realized something chilling. Linda's plan would have turned Mom into Margaret, slow, quiet, forgotten. But Mom would have become James, angry, aware, uncooperative. And that scared them more than confusion ever could. We didn't speak for a long time after leaving Sunshine Manor. The car engine hummed softly as we pulled onto the road, the building shrinking in the rearview mirror until it looked small and harmless, which somehow made it feel even more dangerous. Margaret had been confused and heartbroken. James was furious and brilliant, two completely different people. Same cage, that thought wouldn't let go of me. Linda's plan would have turned Mom into Margaret, quiet, isolated, forgotten. But Mom would have become James, aware, uncooperative, impossible to silence, and that scared them more than confusion ever could. I finally broke the silence. Mom, I said quietly, this system lets this happen. She nodded once, eyes still fixed on the road ahead. Because it assumes age equals incompetence, she replied. She paused, then added something that made my stomach twist. They don't need bad intentions, she said, just enough paperwork. That was the most terrifying part. No villains in masks, no dramatic crimes, just forms, signatures, courts that move too fast, families that don't want to ask questions. The buzz of my phone shattered the quiet. Jason, I glanced at the screen. Jason, I found something. My heart jumped me. What? There was a pause just long enough to make me nervous. Jason, Marcus Webb's been advertising. The word felt unreal for elder control. Jason sent screenshots. A clean, professional-looking website filled the screen. Concerned Children Resources soft colors. Stock photos of smiling seniors and relieved-looking adult children. Language carefully chosen to sound compassionate. Taglines jumped out immediately. Is your elderly parent making unsafe decisions, refusing care, managing assets irresponsibly? We help families regain control. Control, not care, control. Mom leaned closer as I scrolled. Our team specializes in complex family transitions, the site read. From evaluation to placement, we guide you every step of the way. Placement, like furniture, like inventory. My hands clenched around the phone. Jason sent another message. Jason, one of the testimonials is from someone named Jennifer Barrett. Barrett, Paul's last name. My stomach dropped. I clicked the testimonial. A smiling woman posed next to an older man in a wheelchair. Concerned Children Resources helped us protect our father when he could no longer make responsible choices. We finally had peace of mind. Peace of mind. By erasing someone else's life. Mom closed her eyes. They did this before, she said quietly. This wasn't desperation. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a family business. Paul's sister, Linda, Marcus Webb, different roles, same machine. And suddenly, fear wasn't the emotion sitting in my chest anymore. Anger was, not explosive anger, focused anger, the kind that sharpens your vision instead of blurring it. The kind that makes you dangerous to the people who depend on silence. Mom opened her eyes and looked at me. This ends now, she said, not emotionally, not impulsively, decided. We gather names, she continued, stories. Evidence, I swallowed, and then we make it impossible to ignore, she said. I thought about Margaret clutching Mom's hand and asking if she could leave. I thought about James, brilliant and trapped, finishing crosswords in a place that treated him like a liability. I thought about all the others whose names we didn't know yet. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't even about justice. This was about stopping a system that quietly destroyed people while calling itself help. As the car rolled forward, the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the road. And for the first time since this all began, I felt something unexpected settle into my bones. Purpose. Linda had tried to make Mom disappear. Instead, she had exposed an entire industry. And now that we'd seen it, there was no going back. 6 months later, no balloons, no music, no pretending. just a cold courtroom with hard wooden benches that creaked every time someone shifted their weight, like the room itself was tired of holding secrets. I sat beside my mother, hands folded tightly in my lap, staring straight ahead, and then the side door opened. Linda walked in wearing an orange jumpsuit, no makeup, no perfect hair, no polished church photo smile. Just consequences. For a moment, I barely recognized her. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but stripped, exposed, like someone who had finally run out of masks. She didn't look at us, not once. The bailiff announced the case number, and everyone stood as the judge entered. The judge's voice was calm, neutral, deadly in its indifference. She began reading the charges like she was listing groceries: elder abuse, conspiracy, forged medical records, attempted kidnapping. Each word landed with a dull thud. Linda's attorney stood up, smoothing his tie. "Your Honor," he began, "my client pleads not guilty by reason of diminished capacity." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was insulting. Depression doesn't make you hire a private investigator to stalk your mother. Anxiety doesn't make you coordinate fake medical diagnoses. Stress doesn't make you plan a blackout. The prosecutor stood next, and when she spoke, there was no drama in her voice, just facts, cold, ordered, unforgiving. She laid it all out: months of planning, surveillance photos, fake diagnoses. A paid doctor, a private investigator, forged paperwork, a controlled power outage. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't desperation. This was infrastructure. This was not a mistake, the prosecutor said calmly. This was a business model. I glanced at Linda then. Her jaw was clenched. Her hands shook slightly. For the first time, I wondered if she finally understood what she'd done, not just to Mom, but to herself. The judge listened without interruption. Then she looked down at Linda. "Bail," she said evenly, "is set at $200,000. The room inhaled as 200,000. Linda's attorney froze. Linda's head snapped up. She didn't have that kind of money. Paul didn't either, which meant only one thing: someone else had it. Someone who had already invested in this operation before. Someone who didn't like losing assets. My mother leaned closer to me and whispered, barely audible, "Marcus Webb." She was right, because predators don't abandon investments, they protect them. As Linda was led out, still not looking at us, something settled over the courtroom. Not relief, finality. This wasn't the end yet, but it was the moment everything tipped. Because now, this wasn't just about a daughter who betrayed her mother. This was about a network that had finally been exposed and was about to fight back. And deep down, I knew something else too. People like Marcus Webb don't pay bail out of kindness. They do it to keep control. 3 days before the trial, not during the day, not when help is close, at 2:17 a.m. That's when my phone rang. I was already half awake, the kind of sleep where your body rests but your mind never really shuts off. Court dates have a way of doing that to you. The screen lit up, Detective Rodriguez. My heart dropped before I even answered. "Carol," she said the moment I picked up, her voice low and urgent, "someone broke into your mother's house." Every muscle in my body locked. "What?" I whispered. "Is she okay?" "She's not there." For half a second that didn't make sense, then it did. Cold spread through my chest like ice water. "What do you mean she's not there?" I demanded. "The house was empty," Rodriguez said. No sign of forced entry. Front door opened cleanly. Professional, that word again. Jason was already awake now, sitting up in bed, reading my face. "What happened?" he whispered. I couldn't answer. Rodriguez continued, "There's something else." My stomach clenched. "There was a note," she said, "on the kitchen table." A pause, in Linda's handwriting. I felt like the room tilted. "What does it say?" I asked. Rodriguez read it slowly. "Mom, I'm sorry it had to come to this. You left me no choice. By the time you read this, you'll be somewhere safe." Safe, the same word, the same lie, different night. Jason swore under his breath and jumped out of bed, already pulling on clothes. "We're going there," he said. We didn't even argue. The drive felt endless. Every red light too long. Every streetlight casting shadows that felt wrong. When we pulled up to Mom's house, police cars were already there. Red and blue lights washed over the front lawn, over the porch where she used to sit in the evenings, over the door that now stood slightly open. No damage, no broken glass, just violation. Inside, everything was untouched. Her purse still on the hook, her shoes by the door, her tea mug rinsed in the sink, and that note sitting neatly on the kitchen table, like it had been placed there carefully, like a goodbye. I couldn't breathe. Jason paced, fists clenched. "This is kidnapping," he said. "This is exactly what they planned." Rodriguez met my eyes. "We've got units looking," she said, "but whoever did this knew how to move quietly." My phone buzzed, unknown number. For a split second, I didn't want to answer. Then I did. "Carol," a familiar voice said calmly. My heart stopped. "Mom, I'm okay," she said. "I need you to listen." "Where are you?" I demanded. "Are you hurt?" "I'm not hurt," she said. "I'm at Sunset Manor." The words didn't register at first. "The nursing home?" Jason said aloud. "Yes," Mom replied evenly. "The same one Linda picked." My vision blurred. "What happened?" I asked. "I went with her," Mom said. That sentence nearly broke me. "You what?" I whispered. Then she explained. Linda had called her earlier that night, crying, panicked, terrified. She told Mom that Paul had lost control, that he'd figured out Linda was cooperating with the prosecution, that he'd decided if the witnesses disappeared, the case would collapse. And here's the part Linda didn't expect, Mom said quietly. She wasn't lying. Paul had planned to erase everyone. Linda, Mom, anyone who could testify. So Linda did the only thing she could, Mom continued. She turned herself in. Jason froze. She gave the police everything, Mom said. Names, accounts, locations, Marcus Webb's client list, his protection network. I sank onto the edge of the bed. Linda was a monster, but even monsters panic when murder enters the conversation. She used me as bait, Mom said calmly. She knew if she brought me somewhere obvious, somewhere documented, she'd survive the night. And you? I asked. I went, Mom said, because I knew they'd be watching. And I knew exactly where they'd expect me to be. Silence filled the room, then Mom added something I'll never forget. Carol, she said, this ends now. The trial didn't take long after that. Once Linda turned over everything, the money trail, the burner phones, the offshore accounts, the shell companies, the entire operation collapsed like a cheap stage prop. Marcus Webb had built his empire on silence, and Linda broke it. Federal charges followed fast, not dramatic, not emotional, methodical. Marcus Webb was arrested in a parking garage 3 states away while trying to board a private flight. The man who sold family asset protection as a service package suddenly looked very small in handcuffs. He pleaded not guilty. It didn't matter. 15 years in federal prison, no early release, no consulting from behind bars. Paul tried to run. He didn't make it past the county line. 25 years, attempted murder, conspiracy, witness tampering. Dr. Peterson cried in court, said he was pressured. The judge didn't care. 10 years. Medical license revoked permanently. As for Linda, she got 3 years, not forgiven, not excused, but held accountable. She never looked at Mom again, not once. 11 elderly people were released from nursing homes they never belonged in. 11, Margaret Foster went home, back to her garden, back to her roses, back to her life. James Chen went back to teaching guest lectures at the university at first, then full-time. His first class filled the largest lecture hall on campus. Students gave him a standing ovation. Jason got accepted into law school. Specializing in elder law, he said, someone has to understand the paperwork predators use. And my mother, she sold her house, not because she was afraid, because she was finished being attached to things she could lose. She moved closer to the courthouse, started working with legal aid clinics. At 85 years old, she found her second calling, advocacy. One evening, we sat together on her porch as the sun went down, the air cool and quiet. I asked her softly, any regrets? She smiled, not sadly, not bitterly, just honestly. I regret trusting the wrong person, she said, but I don't regret fighting back. Linda tried to make my mother disappear. Instead, she created a woman who refused to be silent, a family that refused to look away. And a warning for anyone watching this right now: if someone rushes paperwork, if they isolate an elderly parent, if care looks like control, that's not love. That's theft in a sweater. If this story hit you, share it. If you've seen something like this, talk about it. And if you're still here, subscribe, because silence is what predators count on, and now they're running out of places to hide.